Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. You are live with Endeavor Gaming, and tonight we're going to be taking a look at the Kirk class temporal battlecruiser, trying out a beam overload build and seeing what we think of the ship. So let's go on ahead and get into it. So, as I said before, right here we have the Kirk temporal battlecruiser from the promotional R&D ship box. I've been able to mess around with this ship for the last couple of weeks. Those of you who've been following me on Twitch already know that, and I freaking love this ship. But I thought we would do a more in-depth analysis of it and, see what we think of the ship. So, let's go ahead and get started. On here, I've got loaded up an offshoot of my beam overload build, though I've definitely gone for more raw damage more than anything else in this build, even sacrificing some of my oh so lovely space Barbie. So let's go through that layout. For our 5-4 weapons, we have the enhanced biomolecular photon torpedo, the phaser wide-angle dual heavy beam bank, the Terran Task Force phaser beam array, the Terran Task Force dual heavy cannons, and a sensor-linked dual beam bank. So, some justification for all of them. Torpedo, doing it for that 2-piece set, getting that bonus phaser damage. The wide angle, we've got the 2-piece set, but also this is such a fun phaser to use, and it hits hard, especially on beam overload. You might be noticing that I'm not actually using a 2-piece set from the Terran reputation. The only reason I'm using both is because I want that to proc as much as possible. So, it's not that I think that the Terran set is bad, but I thought I'd just get more use out of using both of these weapons. Also, the 2-piece set is projectile weapon damage, so not going to help out a whole lot on a build like this. And sensor link, just because I can't not use sensor link. It's so much fun. Moving on to our deflector, I've been in between deflectors lately, so I just threw on one that I already had that's basically just hull cap, getting a little bit of shield, but really focusing on the control expertise, because fragment of AI tech is one of the big traits I tend to use on ships. Moving on to our impulse, we've got our competitive engines. It's really hard to drop those, especially the ones that proc off of firing mode. And we've got the Disco 2-piece set here for our warp core and our shield. They're both alright. You could obviously substitute them out for something else if there's a different 2-piece set you wanted to use, but the Disco is always a solid choice. Alright, moving on here, we've got our heavy biomolecular turret to finish out that 2-piece set. We've got a sensor-linked omnidirectional beam array. Again, you know how much I love sensor-linked weapons, and having that omni, it's just adding to the fun. And in our last slot, we have the trilithium-enhanced omnidirectional phaser beam array. While I wouldn't say this is my favorite omni damage-wise, we'll get back to it later, but there is a set that I really like that this is contributing to. Moving on to our universal consoles, as always, we've got Lorca, Crit Chance, and Shield Pen. Can't go wrong. Moving on to engineering, we've got Domino for our phaser damage, and our weapon haste. On beam overload haste is a very big thing, and the more of it we can get, the better. Weaponized helical torsion. This comes off of another promo ship, the Mirror Crossfield, also available in the 10th anniversary bundle, but nice boost to crit severity and a Cat 1 boost to phaser damage. DPRM, come on, if you guys have seen any of the other videos, you gotta have DPRM. That clicky is just, it's the end all be all. That's the difference between dying and not dying. That's the difference between melting an enemy in a single volley versus 3. And now, going back up to that Omni I was talking about earlier, reinforced armaments. This is another one from the Trilithium set. I believe this comes from the mission Beyond the Nexus. But I was doing it for that 2-piece set. So that's another boost to our firing cycle haste, and it's giving us a little bit of boost to our flight speed. Always nice. I've been trying out that set a lot more, and I've been enjoying it. For our science consoles, we've really just got it filled with all the consoles that you kind of want to have for crit chance, crit severity, all of those good things. Since this isn't a science-oriented ship, I didn't really have to use a whole lot of dedicated science consoles. So we've got tachyokinetic converter, binaural infusion circuits, and the assimilated module. And as far as tactical consoles go, obviously this one is up in the air depending on whether or not you need more crit chance or more crit severity. I've got 2 locators and 2 exploiters on here. It's got a nice balance. So right now my crits are resting at 43.8% for crit chance and 250.9 for crit severity. Obviously, I also have the benefit of having my endeavors and both of those things maxed out. So depending on where you're at, you might want to flip around which consoles you have where and how many of each you have, but that's entirely up to you. And let me do this now because I know I will forget. Let's turn on our intel specialization. Might be important. Moving on to traits. This is always a fun one. So we've got Fleet Coordinator. This one's going to come in handy most when running ISEs or, basically any TFO. For what we're doing today, we're going to be running patrol solo, so this won't be as helpful, but when you're running things with the team, that 2% bonus all damage per team member is always nice. And, you got a full team, that's 10% right there. Next, we've got Context is for Kings. This is one I tend to go for in basically anything. You can't lose. If you take damage, you're getting your damage resistance ratings up. And if you didn't take damage, you're getting free bonus damage. I mean, there's nothing not to love about that. Next, we got Innocuous. This is just helping us with our threat gen so we don't get hit as much, and the boost to crit severity is always nice. Intelligence Agent Attaché. So, things like Attack Pattern Alpha are, amazing for tactical captains. 50% bonus all damage, 5% crit chance, almost 50% crit severity, and a nice boost to your flight turn rate. Getting crit hits is going to lower that cooldown more and more and more from 2 minutes. It's a nice one to have. It's a pretty standard one. Superior beam training. We're running a beam build. Why not have it? We've got Terran targeting systems, which is giving us a nice boost to our crit severity. Obvious trade-off being, if you take a crit hit from something else, you're, taking away 10% of your speed for 5 seconds, but at least it doesn't stack, and there are ways to mitigate that. Deuterium surplus. Obviously, we've got the competitive engine, so I'd say it's worth it. Next, we've got Adaptive Offense. This is one of my favorite space traits. Just getting a nice boost to your crit chance, and then every time you get a critical strike, 0.9% crit chance becomes 3% crit severity for 10 seconds. Next, we've got Into the Breach. This one is going to come in handy a lot too. I mean, you get a kill, you're debuffing all of the nearby enemies' resistances, which is making them easier to kill. Though, I'd say that this would be the first thing to go if there's something else you might want to use, depending on maybe having a little bit of trouble with survivability. Throw on something that helps your healing. Next, we've got Fragment of AI Tech. So, this is why I was really focusing on that control expertise I was talking about, because you're getting a nice Cat 1 damage to your energy weapon damage based on your control expertise. And as you can see, just unbuffed, I'm just about maxing it out. And once I'm buffed, that's going to be 30% no problem. And lastly, I know it's expensive, and I know it's also in the Lobby store, but I highly recommend picking yourself up Boimler's trait. This trait has been absolutely fantastic. It is essentially made the 32nd century weapons obsolete. It's also made the trait Into the Book obsolete for Gravwells, because you can just always have a Gravwell up when you have this trait running. It's ridiculous how useful it is. If you don't have it already, I highly recommend saving up and trying to get it. You will not be disappointed. Moving on to our Starship traits here, we've got Super Weapon Ingenuity. First one I'd say you gotta have for a beam overload build. Give yourself an extra 5 seconds. Easy. Next, we've got Overpowered and Overgunned. This is one I've been trying out a little bit. This is the firing cycle haste for weapons that it's giving you, and it's giving you a nice little cool off for your your weapon power cost. This one tends to come off and go on depending on what I'm doing. It's a weird one, I would say. It's a good trait. It's just how much you're planning on getting out of it at any given time. And we'll get into it later, but I've also occasionally been replacing this and then putting on something like the Best Diplomat, for example. Let's see if I can find that. And of course, because I'm actually looking for it, it just disappears. But yeah, oh, I've already got it on anyway, so we'll get into that just a little bit later. I have very mixed feelings about this trait. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. But moving on, next, we've got Best Diplomat. So when you activate something like Fire at Will or Beam Overload, your weapon damage is improved by engine, shield, and aux power. Now this is going to work best if you're able to max out all of those power levels, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but it's not as hard as you would think, especially if you've got the right duty officers for it. Next, we've got Strike from the Shadows. This is always a nice tactical ability to have. If you're targeting a foe, or you're damaging a foe that doesn't have you targeted, you're getting a nice little boost to your critical chance, and you're getting some bonus damage on top of that. Next, we've got Promise of Ferocity. Again, basically, if you're running tactical abilities on your ship, you're getting bonus damage. And if you're running Pilot, even better. All works out. And lastly, we have a new addition to the group, Terran Goodbye. This is one I just got actually a couple of minutes ago, and we're going to try it on in this build and see if I like it or not. It should be fun. Finishing out our traits of sorts, we're going to look at our space reputation. We've got Tyler's Duality, giving us crit chance based on our whole capacity. It's usually one I go for. Landry's Loyalty is another good one. You get a critical hit, you're cleansing a debuff. This one is kind of a back and forth. Like, there's a lot of things that can debuff you, so it's convenient. But if you're running something where you're not expecting to get debuffed, like, say, an ISE, maybe trade this out for something else. Entirely up to you. We've got Precision, obviously, crit chance. Magnified Firepower, giving us bonus weapon damage. And from the one thing I don't have at tier 6 yet, ironically, Advanced Targeting Systems. This will be even better once I get this, reputation to tier 6, but 16% is still a pretty good amount. So, I think that's just about all of that. Let's take a quick look at our duty officers. Only reason these two are still blue is because the purple ones are still stupidly expensive. But stacking crit chance on firing projectiles, crit severity on firing projectiles. Why do I use projectiles instead? For one, these are the duty officers I have. Also, the boost from them is greater than it is from beams, so not losing anything. Let's move on to our two Borg duty officers. So here, we've got 26 of 47. Tactical abilities is damage over time, and then crit chance on activating different abilities. And then 24 here is what I was talking about before with the Best Diplomat. Tactical abilities have a 15% chance of setting all of my power levels to maximum. And as you can see, I've got a lot of tactical abilities. Icing on the cake. And even though I don't actually use it, because this ship, I don't believe, has any Miracle Worker on it, is the critical chance. So, in the future, I'll probably try to get something that actually procs off of Temporal, but I know I had this duty officer ready already. And rounding out our little group here, we've got our Beam Overload, giving us a chance for the shield pen to go up by 35%. Pretty solid one to have. I believe it's a 30% chance. And then lastly, because I didn't have any more temporal command duty officers to throw on, we've got a 5% chance for plus 20 shield power. Again, possibly feeding into the Best Diplomat, but this would also be another one to go once I get something better. So, we've talked about the ship a bit. Let's take it into combat and see what we think of it. Hopefully just about everything is off of cooldown here, except for Wanted, so I guess we're doing Sentinels. Let's go. And I realized immediately that this is going to go very fast because I don't think I switched my difficulty from Advanced. Oh, that's unfortunate. For them, it is very, very, very unfortunate. Well, so long, poor Alachi. You never really got the chance. But let's go into combat and, have some fun and see what we can get this ship to do. So, one thing you may have noticed is that there is one bridge officer ability that I seem to be avoiding using. And that is recursive shearing. And I'll tell you why. This ship is a whole lot of fun and has definitely been one of my favorites because of this command temporal seating. Recursive shearing 3 is potentially your highest damage dealer. This is just stupid amounts of damage, and it's all at once. The one trade-off of it, though, and if we read tooltip, we'll see. For 5 seconds, the amount of hull depleted from target is stored, and then upon expiration, deals physical damage equal to 30% of stored value. So, say you're going up against a target, and over the course of 5 seconds, you do 100,000 damage to it. At the end of that 5 seconds, another 30,000 damage is inflicted all at once. So if you're doing something like an ISC and you have a whole team beating on a tactical cube, that damage is going to rack up. I have had damage numbers in the 6-7 million range as a single one hit from recursive shearing. It is a fun ability, and it really helps sell this, especially on a beam overload build, because you can do a whole lot of damage in a short amount of time when your cooldowns line up just right. But we pretty much, blasted through that because advanced isn't really a challenge. So why don't we put the ship in a real challenge? Let's do a rescue and search on elite and see if this ship continues to impress. Let's go. I will say, while I usually tend to be back and forth on the design of some of the 32nd century ships, the Kirk has been one that has always impressed me with its design. Those of you that are around on Twitch, I just call this thing the Big Bertha Connie, and it earns its name. It is a massive Connie. And there's nothing not to love about that being a thing. And I think one thing about this ship is it is a battle cruiser. It's the size just about in-game of the Vengeance, but it's a battle cruiser. So it gets the turn rate of a battle cruiser. It's not far off from, say, the Gagarin, despite being, size-wise a much, much, much more massive ship. Plus, it's a 32nd century ship, and you get all of the perks thereof. For example, a built-in Federation battle cloak. Using this at the beginning of the run, decloak right before you go into combat, you've got yourself a nice little boost to your Cat 1 damage right at the beginning. And we are on elite, right? Because those Klingon ships just went down. They didn't even stand a chance. Oh, and another big thing. Another reason why I went really heavy into control. Having a grav wall on here is going to be very convenient. Because while it does turn well, it's not as fast as an escort. The more things you can keep directly in front of you, the better your life will be. Plus, another nice DOT can't hurt. Plus, this ship is kind of weird. Like, it's got that third science seat. Most of the battle cruisers I mess with don't have space for any kind of gravel, but this one is great. I really like the seating on this ship. For a beam overload build, this is just about everything I'd want. Do I have a commander attack seating? No. And I mean, attack pattern Omega is nice, but I wouldn't say it's a must-have either. But this ship has everything I feel like I need to have from a beam overload build. And it does it very well while looking nice and sleek while doing it. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments what you think about the Kirk. And what do you think about 32nd century ships in general? Oh, I'm about to die. I forgot how hard those Klingons hit. They sure do get angry when I hit them with stuff, don't they? Alright, Klingons. I see. I see. Those transport warheads, I think, are the most dangerous thing that they use. Not gonna lie. They are just the most frustrating ability ever. Luckily, as you can see, my healing potential is actually not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. Now I can take a couple of hits. This is not built as a tank in any stretch of the imagination. That being said, with that, Lieutenant Commander command seating, I wouldn't discount your ability to make this into a tank if you wanted to. I'd say the possibilities are very much open. But now that we're in combat, let's take another look at our crits. We're at 67 and over 300% crit severity. That's what I like to see. That is a very, very, very solid score to have there. I'm liking it. You also see we're proccing off Boimler's effect pretty regularly too. We're not having to wait a painstakingly long time. And another big thing, I was talking about my healing potential a little bit earlier. You might notice that this ship is missing something, and that is engineering seats or hull heals of any kind. The healing that you see, that's passive. The ship can take a couple of hits. Look at our damage resistance ratings. We're, in the 40-ish. We're in the 40s, high 40s. Plus, we're about to have DPRM off of cooldown, which is going to make it even harder to kill us. And we get the benefit of all of our ships being nice and bunched up in our gravity well. Because even though this is a Grav Well 1, remember, we were trying to max out our control expertise. So, we may not be doing a lot of damage to them with the Grav Well, but we're pulling them in from 7.2 kilometers. Everything feeds into everything. I think that's one of the fun parts about doing builds like this. It's when a lot of things sort of all work out together. You've got that control expertise for Fragment of AI tech, and because you happen to have the space for the Grav Well, it's also making that Grav Well just a little bit nastier. And this isn't a science ship. But it can do work. And it can do crowd control too, which is a very nice to have, especially on something like a beam overload build. Getting things together tends to be a bit of a problem. But there you have it. No deaths. Everything melted. So, my initial thoughts on the Kirk. This has honestly been one of my favorite ships. I'd say it's up there with my inquiry as far as how much fun I like flying it and how much fun I have using it, especially as a beam overload build. And granted, I've been stretching out more and working on science and a couple of torque builds, but I keep coming back to beam overload just because of how satisfying it is to have those one hits where everything in front of you just gets melted. And the Kirk class is a great example of, is the seating optimal? I mean, no. There are very few ships I would say are, but if you're going to build a beam overload ship and you want to have fun with temporal abilities like this is a pretty good choice. But let me know what you guys think. Did you pick up the Kirk? Maybe you're thinking about getting it in the future. I'm sure that if they run another meta event next year, this one will probably be available in that pack. So, let me know what you think. But again, I'd say if I had to rate this thing for survivability, solid 8 out of 10. We were taking some damage there, especially towards the end, but passive heals were able to take care of it, so I don't think we would have too much trouble with it. And as far as damage, I'd say again, an 8 out of 10. It's not going to be as powerful as some of the high-end science and torque builds, but for beam overload, this thing does fantastic. And it's going to put up some numbers. It's going to make some people sweat. But that's all the time we have today. If you want to see this ship in more action, feel free to check us out over on Twitch, where I fly this ship and many others. This ship is part of my second fleet, which represents all of my future timeline ships, including ships like the Janeway and the Verne and the Crossfield Refit. We will see you in the next video. As always, you have been live with Endeavor Gaming, and remember to keep calm and game on.